So let's just get into what this is about then in some detail. So this is a definition of fair trade. This will be important for that question I gave you a minute ago, which is how do we get to be a social movement and an enterprise, and what do we have to think about? So this is the definition, the official definition, if you like, of what fair trade is. It's a trading partnership. I'll explain the colours to you in a moment. It's a trading partnership based on dialogue, transparency, respect. It seeks greater equity in trade. It can contribute to sustainable development, better trading conditions to secure rights for marginalised producers in the South. Backed by consumers, fair trade organisations are engaged in supporting and raising awareness, campaigning for changes in the rules. So you can see that already it's trying to say it's interested in campaigning, but it's interested also in economics and in development. So if we pull out those little words that we saw by colour, we can do a little bit of a simple analysis of the discourses of fair trade, and I would suggest you see three little sort of clusters. You've got a bunch of discussion in that definition around process, how do we relate to our producers, and that's about things like transparency, respect, equity. We've got a bunch of stuff about economics of development, so we want to focus on their business skills, increase their opportunities to trade, and so on. And then a bunch of discussion in that definition around politics and things like rights, empowerment, campaigning. So these three kind of strands weave together in fair trade, but of course they're quite different strands, right? On the one hand, campaigning and trade justice and going on marches is probably quite different from the kind of things you need to be doing to sell shirts in Marks and Spencer's, right? It's a different kind of set of skills, a different positioning. So how do we hold all that together? We'll come back to that. So what is it? In essence, so fair trade is it's a development tool, okay? It's about getting the poor out of poverty, but critically, it's a market-driven model, so it's not charity, okay? The critical point here is that consumers want to buy fair trade stuff. They do it freely, in free markets, in their supermarkets, in their clothes shops, and wherever else they can buy it. Their churches, their Oxfam shops. So this is not about taking government or foundation or charity money and just giving it to the poor. It's about saying, we can find a market for your products, for producers, that give you back a greater proportion of the economic value of what it is you're growing or manufacturing to stop you being poor. Okay, so it's the difference between the women in the Swallows Project who are getting a decent wage for weaving and designing their shirts, and the women who are trapped in a slum in Dakar working in a factory for less than the price of this morning's cappuccino you bought from your factory or whatever it is, right? So that's the principle. So it's about changing the supply chain. It's about making you as the consumer feel connected to the producer in a real way, and it has these two elements we talked about. Something about social enterprise, which is let's be a really good business, and something about change, which let's make sure that we address the fundamental problems that are letting poor producers be exploited, if you like. Of course, it's a good story for retailers as well. It's a feel-good story as well. So there are two models, really, that reflect some of those issues. There's the label you probably know pretty well if you buy fair trade, which is that one there. That's the thing you see in your coffee and tea, your fair trade cotton t-shirts and all the rest of it. And that's run by a certification body called Flow. I'll tell you a bit more about them in a minute. Fair trade labelling organisations. But there's another side to fair trade that you may not be so familiar with, and that's what's called the World Fair Trade Organisation. And these are the people that represent fair traders who don't have access to the label on the top there. So, for example, for clothing, there are no set of standards established that can give you this label. There are for, say, coffee, because coffee's easy, right? Coffee is a simple commodity product, and you can say, here are the standards that you have to follow to be fair trade. You have to pay your workers so much, you can't use pesticides, X, Y, Z, pay a minimum price. For clothing, it's much more complicated, because a shirt is different from a jumper, is different from a pair of trousers, is different from a dress or a sari. So it's very difficult to set the same kind of standards that apply to everything. So for things like clothing, they don't fit in that category, they fit in this. But also behind these two labels, there's a kind of different set of ideologies. And Flow has been very focused on the enterprise side of this, building businesses, whereas WFTO has been more focused on the kind of advocacy social movement side of this. So in a sense, those two halves of fair trade are represented to some degree by these two different labels, if you like, or two different sides of the fair trade coin. We're going to say too much about this. This is just detail if you wanted to know it, so I'll go through all of it. But on the flow side, the first type of organisations, you can see what's going on. They've been around for a while. They ended up bringing together lots of local initiatives that were trying to build a label for fair trade and unifying them together. That became the Fair Trade Labelling Organisations International. It's now 24 associations across a bunch of countries. So they set standards. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. They typically focus on commodity products, so you have tea, coffee, cotton, sugar, cocoa, products that are there's just a product. It's not a huge product range. Right, there's only two types of coffee, right? Arabica and Robusta coffee, that's it. So it's very simple. But as I said, if you're thinking about cotton t-shirts, cotton mixed t-shirts, proper formal shirts, woolen jumpers, there's a huge variety of clothing. It's not like cotton. They make money by charging producers, perhaps controversially, a fee, and also people who put the label on. In 2002, that mark was first launched. So here's an example, bless you, example of coffee about what they actually do. So the first thing is there's a minimum price you have to pay. If you want to put the fair trade mark on a product, it's a guarantee to the people who are buying it that a minimum price has been paid to the producer, the farmer at the far end of the supply chain. Okay? So in the case of Arabica, which is top quality coffee, it's $1.25 a pound. And you'll see in a minute a graph of where the world price of coffee has been going, and often it's been much lower than that. But Fairtrade says we guarantee producers that amount of money. Why do you think that's important? Why is having a minimum price guarantee important if you want to alleviate poverty?
To make sure that the people who are in poverty are getting enough to live.
Exactly. So it's established as a kind of living wage, if you like. So you're guaranteeing them an income they know they can feed their family on. It doesn't make them rich, but it means they won't ever be starving. Now, for very poor people, that's incredibly important in terms of planning their lives, right, and what they might do with any other income they might generate. Could they actually send their kids to school? Could they do other things? If you know you're not going to starve, that's a big plus for very poor people. So it's really important to give them security of their lives. But then there's a bunch of other stuff Fairtrade does which is really important too. So they, for example, if you have organic coffee, they pay you a bit more. That's 20 cents, not $20 a pound. Also, there's a premium. So the Fairtrade organisation guarantees there'll be some extra money paid on top of just the cost of the coffee. That's used for kind of development projects. And there's a bunch of other things about supporting farmers and supporting small-scale manufacturers. So it's a whole package of stuff, the Fairtrade promise, if you like. So when you buy your Cafe Direct or Tea Direct coffee or whatever it is, with a label on it, all of this is guaranteed and it's audited third party. So it's somebody else is coming in and checking it's really happening and guaranteeing it. So it's a very robust mechanism.